We've seen people literally turn their shed into a home gym, a home office, podcast studio, music recording studio, workshop. I mean, you name it, it's crazy. And then we do build garages too. So, I mean, sheds, barns, garages, we do all three, and they've been literally turned into everything I can think of. We did just build one last week, and the parents bought it solely for their kids as a playhouse.
Welcome back to the ROCC Pod, produced for the Royal Oak, Michigan Chamber of Commerce. I am John Gay from Jack and Detroit Podcasts.
I'm Lisa Bibby, a realtor with Keller Williams Advantage.
And today we welcome Ricky Martin and Adrian Adkins from Tuff Shed. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome. Good morning.
Hey, how you doing?
Ironic, given your names, that it's not actually Ricky Martin, but Adrian Adkins that has the stage experience between the two of you. So before we talk about Tuff Shed, Adrian, I got to hear about your love for the stage and all things related to that.
Oh, yeah. I've been doing theater for 8 or 9 years now. Started in high school and just kind of picked up and never left it. Done over 40 productions, musicals, plays, one acts, just kind of all over. It's just been an enjoyable experience and gives you something to do outside of work.
Any favorite productions that popped to mind off the top of your head?
I just did a Rock of Ages a couple months ago. A lot of fun. Get to sing some awesome songs from the 80s.
So you're a singer, not just an actor.
Yes. I don't sing in front of people. That's too much on the spot. But it's a lot of fun. Singing is fun at times until you do it every single day for 3 months, but it's all good.
Well, Adrian, it's great that you found your passion. And speaking of passions, Ricky, you're a movie buff. What is the movie that you have watched the most times?
My favorite movie, two favorite movies of all time, are Jaws and Empire Records. So I'm also a huge music fan. And growing up as a 90s kid, like seeing a movie about teenagers working at a record store was always like a dream of mine. So that's probably how I landed with my first main employer, which is where I met Adrian. And then always had a love for music, more so movies, but those two stick out for sure.
I have a confession. I was a radio DJ for 15 years and never saw that movie, so I need to get on that.
Oh my gosh, it's fantastic. I understand why you've watched it. How many times have you seen it?
Hundreds. It's like that movie that just like, you know, especially before I had kids, if I was like bored or rainy weekend or whatever, I would just throw it on because it was like a feel-good movie. You could walk away from it and come back, especially once you see it a ton. My oldest daughter's now seemingly into sharks, so she's asked about watching Jaws, but she's probably still a little too young to go through that kind of trauma.
Well, you mentioned a moment ago where you guys met, and I know you're working together now at Tuff Shed, but you met at a previous job. Either one of you want to tell us about that?
So yeah, we met at Best Buy. Ricky worked there much longer than I did, but it just so happened coincidence and our paths kind of crossed. I ended up coming to work at one of his stores to be his Verizon expert, and then that led to me being a supervisor and just kind of built our relationship from there. And yeah, Ricky's always been such an awesome guy and just always being able to support you and be there as a friend and as your leader. So, I mean, he made it a very, very easy choice for me to come over here and work for him.
So Ricky, how did you end up over at Tuff Shed, and tell us about how you guys ended up moving over there and working together?
I spent 20 years with Best Buy, and ultimately the store that I was at just had some lease negotiations issues and was going to close so permanently. And I didn't want to leave the company at the time, but it did make me look around for some other options. And this job that I had found just seemed to be a better suit for my family life. And I chose to jump in and try something different that I definitely had no experience in. And then fast forward a couple months, we make some changes with our sales team, and I'm starting to think of high caliber people that I've met along my way and who I could maybe extend an olive branch to without trying to steal a ton of people. But Adrian was always one of those guys that just, I don't know, the communication skills and the way he talks to people is top tier. And like, so when I think about customer service and sales, he was just one of those people at the forefront of my mind that I was like, I'll ask him. Worst he can say is no. And I was thankful that he said yes and wanted to join me and jumping into something fresh.
And it's perfect that we're having this conversation with the Royal Oak Chamber, because it speaks the power of networking and who you know in your network, that when you either have a job to fill or want to work with somebody, that you think about the folks you've gotten to know on a personal basis, which is also why I love doing this podcast, getting to know so many of the chamber members.
Yeah.
You know, we have everything from garden sheds to glammed up she sheds. You want to talk to us a little bit about Tuff Shed?
I guess I'll start with, I've been here 16 months and I have seen sheds turned into everything. The most common use is just your average garden shed for lawn mowing equipment and whatnot. But I think COVID for this company, which predates both of us, was a huge, huge change. a lot of people working from home, gyms were closed, but that really didn't stop after COVID. So, I mean, we've seen people literally turn their shed into a home gym, a home office, podcast studio, music recording studio, workshop. I mean, you name it, it's crazy. And then we do build garages too. So, I mean, sheds, barns, garages, we do all three, and they've been literally turned into everything I can think of. We did just build one last week, and the parents bought it solely for their kids as a playhouse. So,
Oh, wow.
it's crazy what people will design or have for intended use. And I'm sure Adrian's already seen quite a variety just being in the Royal Oak office.
You know what? Being as I'm in the marketing business, I have this phenomenal idea that just popped into my head because you're talking about so many uses of Tuff Shed. Your slogan should be, it's not just a Tuff Shed, and then just spiral off all these cool images of what you're using the sheds for. And then that would like inspire people to, oh yeah, I need one of those because I want to create this, a gym or an office or a podcast studio.
Yeah.
That's a huge point. Only been with the company for roughly about 5 months, but just kind of seeing some of the ideas that people come up with, and then like the ideas that people think of after I mentioned, like, oh, I had this client who ended up using this solely as an additional space for their kids to play in, or an additional space for them to just have their own work area in. Creating a separate space outside the home. A lot of people have kind of jumped in on that and love that idea.
I love that everything you do seems to be just customized for the individual customer because there's so many different things you can do with any kind of a shed, as we've been talking about. How does the installation process work, kind of from walking into the store to having something to play in or work in at home?
I think timeline varies depending on where you live and what your requirements are, from like concrete or rat wall, or if you can just have gravel, or if it can go on grass. I mean, every city is different. But I will say, like, the average timeline, if it's under 200 square feet and it just needs for what we see as a traditional zoning permit, it's a pretty quick process. I mean, Adrian could probably speak better to how many times people change their design before they make their final purchase. But I can't imagine on average it's more than a handful of days. But by the time they make their purchase, we're typically installing within 2 weeks. And the installation process itself, which floors a lot of people. I mean, the average building takes about 4 or 5 hours. If it's a large building or a garage, we'll schedule a full day or 2 days if it's something pretty big. But we've seen everything from, since I've been here, like a 6x6 is the smallest I've seen. And then I know yesterday I had a crew completing a 30x30 garage in Westland. So
Wow.
there's been some really big buildings that people will buy or purchase and just use for personal business, like all kinds of stuff. So the process is pretty quick. When it gets that big, that's where we see the timelines grow, because now we need, typically most cities will require stamped plans, like engineered drawings. So that process is lengthy. It's a few months, but we're upfront with the customer to tell them, here's what your timeline's going to look like, and then just make sure that they're okay with that before we proceed.
So you must have been reading my mind, because that was what I was going to ask you next, was about permits. So do you guys actually handle the permit for the client?
So we give them the choice. It's ultimately up to the customer. I mean, if they want to pull it themselves, they can. If they want to pay us a permitting fee, like we have a permit technician that works here at the office that she does it for all of our purchases and cover our region.
You're based in Royal Oak. You cover just kind of a radius from where you are, or?
Yes, so for my location, we cover roughly from the northern area of Detroit upwards to around Alpena, just east of Alpena. We got roughly 4 locations that service different parts of Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. Not to mention, we also are partnered with Home Depot that covers some of those ins and outs too.
Got it.
Yeah, we have a total of 75 Home Depot stores that we service, and the 4 retail locations, which are our own stores, like where Adrian's working. So we have just shy of 80 total locations that we're ultimately taking care of.
You had mentioned that sometimes it's just standalone, sometimes there's concrete. How does the foundation piece of it work if that's required for a specific project?
I mean, we let them know that it's required. We don't have a particular vendor that we use yet. I say yet because we're hopeful to launch a concrete program in partnership with Tuff Shed here soon, probably this summer. But right now, most offices, we have local vendors that we give a customer, like, here's a handful of names of, concrete vendors that have done work for our customers before, and kind of let the customer choose or get quotes on their own. So we're hoping to make that process a little bit easier for them by having our own vendor or vendors, plural, hopefully in the future, so that they can just make one purchase, one fell swoop, so they don't have to go do that whole bid process themselves.
So you had mentioned briefly about a larger size barn. And when I think of Tuff Shed, I usually think of like the garden shed size. How large do you guys go?
I don't know if there's really a limit to it. I mean, do you know what the configurator limit is?
So biggest that we offer in our configurator would be 40 by 40.
Wow.
And then we go obviously as small as 6 by 6, or depending on the style, I think you can go 4 by 4 or 4 by 6. We have a very wide range in terms of what you can get, and it's always custom sizing too. So it doesn't have to just be a 30 by 30 or 30 by 40. It can be those odds where it's 12 by 18s and kind of all the in-betweens.
And we are going to see the size limitations will change. They're going to just be, I don't want to say infinite, but close to it. We're going to have a whole new design software launching hopefully right around the first of the year. Right now, the one we have is just limited capacity for what it can 3D design. So like, for example, we have a lot of people who want to see a 2-story barn, and we sell one and we have it on display at a variety of Home Depot stores, but you can't 3D design it quite yet for the customer to see it other than in person. So we're partnering with a new company at the beginning part of next year that from a design standpoint, the customer can see literally everything they want. So we do quotes for bigger, we had a golf course that wanted a quote for a 30 by 100 building for all their golf carts. So we'll make it happen. We'll find a way to quote it. It just might not be something the customer can see like in 3D on the screen.
So question for you, Adrian. We've talked about timeline when it comes to concept to finishing the job. Let's talk about the customer experience. I walk into the store and I know I need a shed. I may have an idea of what I want to use it for, but I might not be completely sure. Walk me through how you would work with me in terms of figuring out what my needs are.
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest thing is figuring out what's going to be ideal for you and what's going to fit what you have in mind. A lot of times it's just showing people what we have available. My biggest thing that I always explain to people is that it's not my job to convince you to buy something. I don't want to convince you to buy something you don't want to get, because then a person can always return that. A person can always just turn something back in that they don't want. And that's not what we want to do. So a lot of it is showing people what's available, and then how do we match that to what is ideal for you. So I can go out there and show you all the benefits of getting all the upgrades and different types of doors and different types of eave upgrades. But at the end of the day, that may not be what you want. So a lot of times we bring customers in, show them what we have. We usually will have like a whole book that shows a bunch of different designs, things that people have done, talking about those home gyms and she sheds and all that kind of stuff. Because when people do think sheds, they think the standard garden or the ranch style sheds, and not necessarily all the things that our sheds can be. A lot of them is showing the options, right? Not trying to push people to do anything, but just explaining what the benefit is of buying a Tuff Shed, explaining that we're the highest quality you can get in America, and all of our work is guaranteed. We're going to give you some of the best product that you can get on the market. Really just try to expand that experience to show it's not just getting you to buy something, it's kind of expanding out with our quality and just kind of hoping that you like what you see. So it's a very, very nice experience to just kind of show people and not try to be pushy about it.
And where is the local location?
Our location is 1603 North Main. We're right in between 12 Mile and 11 Mile.
Got it. All right, it is now time for our fishbowl question of the day, where we ask you a totally random question for both of you. Lisa, if you could pull the fishbowl question for our gentleman today.
All right, Adrian, I'm going to ask you this first. If you had a time machine, which period would you visit?
I'm probably going to say I go back to medieval times.
Ooh.
Since I was a kid, I've always loved like seeing the war movies and all the crazy siege warfare. It's insane. And the idea that people lived without phones, it's always blown my mind because I've grown up with a phone my whole life. So that'd be kind of the perfect time where it's so much drama happening, but it's just a completely different style of living. So it'd be interesting to go back to that time.
I love the outfits from back then, like all the fur and the fabrics, like the velvets.
So
and where did they get velvet? I don't even know.
We're going to knight you now, Adrian. I hereby the sword on each side of your head.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Quick plug for Lisa's YouTube, Sold by Lisa B. She has done so many themed ways of showing houses. I'm sure you've done a medieval one at some point, right, Lisa?
No, but I need to.
There you go.
Okay, there you go.
All right, Ricky, we've given you a minute to think about it. What's your answer? What period would you go back to?
Oh, man, that's tough. I was a mid-'80s born kid, so I would say probably just the 70s, just because for me, my parents really liked 70s music, so I kind of grew up with that. And then my love for film starts with like the more Jaws and Star Wars era. So like the late 70s, early 80s of film for me was probably some of my favorites. So I wouldn't go that far back. I don't think I'd want to go medieval without technology and stuff like that. I enjoy all those things, but I also enjoyed the simplicity of it back then. So
both the periods don't have cell phones. That's the common thread. We're going to knight Adrian, and we're going to put Ricky in the circle, like on that 70s show, and I'll leave that reference there. Okay.
Well, thank you guys both for coming on our show today. Do you want to tell our guests how they can reach you?
And we have pamphlets, brochures, and all of our contact information at our Royal Oak Chamber of Commerce. And again, our location is 1603 North Main Street here in Royal Oak. We are right down the street from all the shops in downtown. So if you grab a bite to eat and you want to stop by and take a look, we are always here.
Beyond that, we have our factory location is in Livonia. For anybody else who's scattered across Michigan, we have a retail store in Grand Rapids as well as Toledo, Ohio. You can go to tuffshed.com and we'll find a way to help you out.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys. It was such a pleasure having you on today. My name is Lisa Bibby, and I'm a realtor with Keller Williams Advantage. I put the real back in realtor, and we want you to love where you live. Questions about buying or selling your home? Call my cell 248-981-3610, or my website is soldbylisab.com, and you can find me on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Sold by Lisa B. Let's connect.
And I'm John Gay from Jag in Detroit Podcasts, specializing in audio and video podcasts, all recorded remotely, just as you've heard and perhaps seen today. Any questions you have about podcasts, you can find me at jagindetroit.com or on any of the social media channels at Jag in Detroit. We want to thank you for listening to this episode of the ROCC Pod, produced for the Royal Oak, Michigan Chamber of Commerce. For any questions about chamber events or how to get involved with the chamber, you can visit royaloakchamber.com. We've got a very busy summer coming up. Thanks, everyone.